The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your financial advisor. As we head into spring, this is the perfect opportunity to do a financial check-in. But what exactly does that mean, and how do you get started? Joining me today is Stephen Connors. He's the founder and president of Connors Wealth Management. When doing a financial check-in, what should people be looking at around this time of year specifically?
If they're doing an analysis of their either portfolio or their budget, meaning their monthly expenses, one of the things I talked about recently with a group was that recurring charges, for instance, is something that's easy to have happen when maybe you're not using it, or maybe it's something you plan on using. Give you an example: a gym membership, Netflix, Hulu, all the streaming services, things like that can be, you don't want to be paying for things that you're not always using. And I think that it's mid-year, beginning of year or mid-year, it's a good time to go through your expenses and cut out any of the items that you don't see as a necessity.
The subscriptions are huge, especially at the beginning of the year. I think people think, I'm going to get more fit this year, so I'm going to join a class or a gym, and then you fall off the wagon, and then before you know it, you're paying for this service that you haven't used in months.
Exactly. It used to be, Netflix was the first company to try the recurring charge, and they were hesitant at first to do it. They tried it. This is some years ago, obviously. Netflix decided to put their monthly fee out there where it would just send your credit card every month. And then the next thing you know, they end up being the pioneer of the recurring charge. They are the ones that were responsible, really, if you look at where it all started from, that it was okay for all companies.
I feel like everything nowadays is some sort of membership thing. Like, you have to join and make an account and then pay this service fee every month. And if you have a lot, it's easy to forget and keep track of like what you're paying for. It is,
and that's the point of bringing that up, is that it's easy to forget. You don't want to be forgetting. And if it's the mid-year spring cleaning, is that if there is any service or product that you are subscribed to and you're not using it, it's a time to set aside a half hour, an hour, what have you, get their phone numbers and call and go ahead and cancel those accounts so they don't reoccur each month.
Do you think this is a good time of year to do probably your first financial check-in, with us being, about 3 months in, I guess?
Personally, I think that everyone should do it on a regular basis. It could be once a month, actually. In my opinion, we're coming into harder times, economically speaking, and there's a prediction from the Federal Open Market Committee member, and they have the Atlanta GDP, or gross domestic product, and they are usually the most vocal and put their numbers out, more so than any of the 12 other districts in the United States. And they're projecting a contraction for the first quarter. It means that would signify a recession where the economy is actually receding.
What can people do now to prepare for that?
Have an emergency fund. It's a great time to make sure that if there is, going to be volatility in the U.S. economy, which has already started, we're 3 or 4 months into this volatile economy, is that you want to be able to know that you have 6 months of expenses. And this is for those that are working. 6 months of expenses in a high yield money market account. Let's say it's paying 4%. It's not so much what you earn, but just to have that money sitting there, that if there's any interruptions or anything negative were to occur, at least you have put some forethought into it ahead of time.
Yeah, especially right now with the job cuts even that we're seeing. You just never know. It's comforting to have that.
And it could be as simple as, you're getting a flat tire and you look at the Discount Tire or whichever tire company it happens to be, and they say, well, you need 2 new tires, or you need all 4. And all of a sudden you're faced with, $500-$600 or more, dependent upon the brands. And you don't want to have things like that, come about and stress you out.
You were talking a little bit about the volatility that we've been seeing over the past
Yes.
couple of months. How has that been impacting you with your clients and your day-to-day work?
Defensive. I mean, I have my clients in a very defensive strategy. They're in mostly T-bills, earning 4.25%. And so right now it's not about getting these high returns or, the key is, as Will Rogers once said, it's not so much the return on my principal, but the return of my principal. And that's one of these periods that we're in now. And so I think preservation of assets when it comes to portfolios should come first, regardless of the bullish people you may hear on CNBC or Barron's or Bloomberg, is that any opinions that you hear, it's obviously words that they're talking about, at 10, 20 years from now, the financial market should be a lot higher. The problem for most Americans is we tend to be more short-sighted, and you want to be thinking about, well, what about the next year or two or the next 5 years? And if we were to go into a recession, how is that going to affect my life? And is it going to impede on what I enjoy doing each week and each month and year? What matters is, can you live the life that you want now? And if you can't, this isn't the time to extend yourself out. This is the time to be more conservative, regardless of your political affiliation or this or that. It's all noise. At the end of the day, you want to be conservative and hunker down. And just while interest rates are still high from what the Fed did in 2022, you take advantage of these higher interest rates. At least you get paid to be conservative while you wait.
What about people who were thinking about retiring this year?
Yeah, I think that it's, those that have saved for retirement and have been diligent. I have a lot of clients that use income annuities because it addresses the longevity risk. A lot of people are thinking, well, I'm 70 and I want to retire. I love my career, but it's time for me to retire. However, with life longevity, how about a lifetime income, which gets added to their Social Security income? Let's say a husband and wife have a certain amount of Social Security income, and they want to add another source of income that gets deposited into their checking account each month. So one of the things I do is, income-oriented annuities where maybe they pay 7 or 8%, and it's guaranteed. It's every single year. And then the principal is exposed to the equity market indirectly. It's not in the market. It's with the insurance company. And if the markets have a good year, you get a piece of that upside. And if it's a terrible year, you don't lose a penny.
Pivoting just a little bit, let's say somebody at the beginning of the year made some financial resolutions. Maybe they wanted to build a savings or pay down debt or do a better job of budgeting. What if they've fallen off the wagon? What do you suggest they do to get back on? Or maybe why is that so important right now?
Because it snowballs against you, because your interest is going to be charged each month and year. And then for them, the amount of debt can snowball. If you don't do anything, it will also grow against you. Look at it from their perspective. It's a Visa or MasterCard account. They're going to make more and more money the longer you let that debt sit there. So a step-by-step first step would be, make sure you pay off those highest interest rate credit cards first. And if you have decent credit, some of the companies like Discover and others are offering 0% for a year. Well, maybe it makes sense to take out a 0% credit card shift it to that while you're in the process of paying down your credit card debt.
Do you think it's a good idea to tackle like the debt first over the savings, or should you build the savings?
No, I would, as much as I hate credit card debt, and I think it's really a poisonous thing for individuals, that use credit to purchase, is that you really need to have some sort of backup emergency fund, though. Because if you're left in a situation where you don't have the resources to be able to take care of something, and you don't want to ever rely on family members or anything like that, you don't want to harm the people you love in terms of those relationships that you have, whether it's family or good friends or what have you. You want to have at least, at minimum, some sort of cushion there. Let's call it 6 months of income, and then you could pay down the credit card debt. As important as the credit card debt is, be conscientious of it. Move it to a 0% credit card if you can, and then work on that. But at the same time, work on making sure, and maybe simultaneously, in terms of building up that slush fund.
For the budgeting piece, let's say
Yes.
someone doesn't have one. How do they get started with that? Do you kind of just sit down and start seeing what you have coming in versus what's going out?
Definitely. So I sit down with individuals, households all the time, every week, and we do inflows and outflows. How much money's coming in? Let's say it's someone that's retired. We go over the husband and wife's Social Security payments, maybe a pension payments coming in, and then I want to go to the next piece. So we count all the inflows. Maybe there's a rental property, and then we go to the outflows. And that's where we may see a Netflix subscription or a Hulu subscription that maybe the Hulu they haven't used in 6 months. So we'll say, okay, that should be cut. And maybe they're spending in certain areas, but you should earmark, how much you're going to spend on vacations in a year. When I go through a financial planning process, I want to make sure that everything's earmarked and that things are as concrete as they can be, because we're talking all about things that are within people's control.
Maybe for someone who's just out of tune with their finances, what are some red flags that they might be headed toward a downward spiral financially?
I would say that first look at your work, what you do for a living, and how secure your actual job is. How big of a company is it? Is it a small or a large corporation? Has there been any layoffs at your company? That's one thing that people should be aware of, because that comes first. And then shelter costs are really high in the United States, whether it's rent or mortgage payments. So do you have 2 extra bedrooms that you never get used? Does it make sense to maybe downsize a little bit? Maybe your kids are growing and you still have the extra bedrooms and they're never used and they're empty. And maybe their items could be put in boxes and put in a garage and stored. So those are, things that people can think about, And then you have wireless companies, T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T. You have that oligopoly, let's say, of those 3.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look at the 3 companies and one of them may be offering 20 or 30% less. If the coverage is good, and make sure you check the coverage first. But if all 3 are covering where you spend, let's say, 90% plus of your time, and T-Mobile is 20% less than Verizon, let's say, then it's not a terrible thing now that you can take your phone number with you to switch to a lower cost provider. The other thing is I cut my cable company finally myself in the last year. I was very, very hesitant because the cable company was so convenient.
Yeah.
But I was spending about $265 a month for cable and internet, TV and internet. Now I spend about $65 instead.
That's a crazy amount of savings per month. That
Isn't
really
that
adds
crazy?
up.
And I thought I'd have less channels, and as it turns out, I signed up for Fubo, Fubo, and that one subscription is I think it's like $60 a month. So I
Wow.
have to count that in there. So let's bring it up to 120. But I get all the channels, even in other cities and stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's something I wish my parents would do is cut the cable, but they're just
I'm
hanging on
talking
for
to
dear
my parents
life.
as well. I have the same conversation myself with my father. And, they get used to it. But the thing is, having been one that finally did cut the cord, I should have done it sooner is the only thing I can say.
I really like, too, what you said about kind of checking your job security. Do you
Yes.
think right now is a bad time to switch jobs if needed?
No. Let's just say this, is if you're with a company, let's say you work for a healthcare company, and, it's maybe you don't like the hours. There's a lot of nurses and even physicians that are healthcare slaves. It may look glamorous if you see your physician and you see MD behind the name, or you see a nurse with the RN after their name. It may sound great. And you say, oh, well, they have nothing to do with the economy, so they keep going in good and bad times. However, sometimes they work so many hours that their eyes are bloodshot, because they've worked 36 hours straight or something.
Right.
And so, but even those people should hang on to those kind of positions, even if they're exhausted beyond what they ever thought, because there's better times to do it, and when the economy is a little bit on tilt, you want to, or let's say you work, in an administrative position. I employ, people here at my company, and I take good care of my employees because I think if you treat them well, it comes back to you, with better work. But the thing is even if you work at Starbucks and you're a barista at Starbucks, is that if you have a steady income, you don't want to take that for granted right now. Because if you don't have a replacement that's assured that's going to be better, then making a transition right now is a little tougher than when it would be in a normal, stabilized economy.
How long do you think it might take to get there? Do you have any predictions?
In terms of what? Economic prosperity?
Yeah, like reaching more stability.
I think the tariff issue is going to be with us, unfortunately, for a little bit. I can't with any specifics say exactly when that will end.
Yeah.
But it does seem like April 2nd is going to be a time where they're going to impose more tariffs. So the trade war is a little unsettling for many companies across the country. And so a lot of companies are holding back on expenditures that they normally might make. So I think that it's a wait and see economy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're kind of in a mode. Think of it this way: if you're driving in your car and everything has been fine in terms of the weather, all of a sudden it starts in a downpour, and your visibility is maybe a couple cars in front of you, and that's it. You really want to slow your car down, obviously, right? Even if it's a expressway or a highway, because you can't see beyond a couple cars. Well, that analogy is appropriate to right now with the economy. If we can only see a car or two in front of us, as opposed to when it's sunny out, then you've got to put the brakes on and slow down and make sure you're going to be safe. Car doesn't veer off, and you don't want to hydroplane, and you don't want to hit the car in front of you, of course. You also want to make sure the car behind you doesn't hit you. So the thing is, you need to have a little bit more alertness, right?
Right.
And so I think it's kind of that situation. So we are a little bit in a fog bank right now.
So I know you've touched on this, but my last question for you would be just what steps can people take now to prepare for the rest of the year and to just make sure that regardless of kind of what's happening externally, they can create as much stability as possible in what they can control at least?
Yeah, what I would say is this, as I already mentioned, reduce expenses as much as possible. Maybe instead of, going out for dinner, maybe you're going out once or twice a week, Maybe you go to the supermarket and make it at home, and so you save money there. You could always drive a little less just because you could reduce those expenditures. And then the other thing is, and I'm talking to mid-America, where it's a little bit, more the average person. Maybe it's not a bad idea to find a passion that you can work part-time. Maybe, there's more work at home than there was prior to the pandemic from some years ago, is that maybe you work on Saturdays. Maybe there's a part-time job you could take on to make ends meet and add to what you've already been, besides cutting expenses and your regular job, is maybe you take on a part-time job to add a little bit more money. And maybe that becomes the area that you use to pay off your credit card debt. No matter what your situation is, if you can maintain a positive mental attitude and a positive way of looking at things, optimism is free. And the thing is that you want to enjoy every day. If it's your family, if it's friends, you want to enjoy that. And you can do everything I talked about, with our conversation today. And at the same time, keep an optimistic attitude, even though you're behaving in a very responsible way.
All right, that does it for this edition of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.